Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask a Property Manager. I'm Eric Worrell with rentprep.com and joined with Andrew Schultz, who's always on here with me. How you doing, Andrew?
Oh, it's just another lovely sunny day here in Buffalo, New York.
Hey, it's warming up, right?
It for the next couple days. Is that Steve in the background?
No, that was, you know what that was? That was a reloop going because I had Facebook open. I just closed it and went away. So this week, we can actually get into it a little bit quicker because we're testing out some different stuff with this service here. And the first thing we're going to be talking about, Andrew, is holding a rental property. So I'm going to read the question here. This came from Diane, and we're not going to put these up on screen because they're kind of hard to see for people. But thank you to Diane for asking this question on January 6th in the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. Here's what she said. Hi, everyone. I have an applicant that wants me to hold my rental until the middle of next month when their lease is up on their place. They're a good prospect, and I would hate to lose them, especially since I haven't had many good applicants. If I agree to wait, what should I do to secure my interest and time?
Pretty straightforward. If you're going to be holding the apartment, make sure you have a fully signed lease and make sure that you have a full security deposit. And one of the things that I would write into the additional terms and conditions on the lease, if it's not already written elsewhere, is that if the tenant does not move into the apartment, that they lose their security deposit as basically a holding deposit at that point. So that's probably the way I would handle it in that situation, especially if you're in a time of the year like we are here in Buffalo where good applicants are harder to come by. It's not necessarily, if you can afford to do it, it's not necessarily a bad idea to hold that unit for that good prospect if it means you know that you're going to have a good prospect in the building. So that's how I would do it, is just make sure you've got a fully signed lease and security deposit. And then, of course, the day before they take possession, make sure that they have the utilities in their name so that you're not getting billed for them anymore.
So do you add anything additional to your normal lease, though, to the security deposit portion, saying that this is like a non-refundable if they don't take the apartment, or is it all kind of in there already?
The last clause in our lease is just an additional terms and conditions, and I just I type in there, in the event that that tenant does not accept possession of the apartment by whatever date you guys had agreed to, tenant will forfeit entirety of all funds paid, or I try to word it a little bit more eloquently than that, but right around something along those guidelines. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
You may have some now that I'm thinking about it, you may have some state laws that prevent you from doing that. So double check your state laws before you start writing things willy-nilly into your lease.
Yeah, that's always a good idea. That's like, rule number 1, check your state laws.
Yeah, exactly. We should start every episode with that. Rule 1, we're not accountants. Rule 2, we're not attorneys.
Yeah. And Andrew's an associate broker with Realty Edge. We got that in there.
Yes.
So.
Yep, there we go.
So we got question 2 up here now. We're talking about electric stoves. On January 2nd, John had asked a question. He said, with electric stoves in your rentals, do you go with a flat top or the ones with the heating elements on the stove top? I'm assuming he's kind of talking about those coil, more traditional.
Yeah, the coil style.
Elements. Yep. So what's your opinion on this with electric stoves? Like, which way do you lean typically?
I think it kind of depends on the market you're operating in. I mean, if you have a $500 a month rental, putting a glass top stove in it probably is not in your best interest. Number 1, they're going to be expensive. Number 2, they're expensive to repair. And number 3, I feel like you're more likely to see a tenant damage a stove, a glass top stove in a lower end rental than, say, if you have a luxury apartment that's renting for $2,100 a month. And obviously these are Buffalo numbers. At $2,100 a month, I would expect to see a flat top and not the coil style, the heating element style ones. So sure. I think it's more market dependent than anything else. But one thing to definitely keep in consideration is there is a huge differential in price of repairs on glass tops versus coil style. And if that glass on the top gets cracked, it's like $450 just to replace that glass top. So it's not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. And like for the coils, I know like the, even those little silver trays that are underneath there, like I used to try to scrub those and clean them up, and then you can buy them for like $5.
They're 12. Yeah. They're a set of 4 from Home Depot is like $12. It's not even, by the time you spend a half an hour, 45 minutes scrubbing them, it's not worth trying to save them. Just go put new ones on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I think that covers electric stoves, which I didn't think would be a question we'd be covering today. It's amazing. There's always so many questions.
There's always something new and exciting going on in the group. Yeah.
Very exciting. Electric stoves. So here's a topic that we've covered before, but we're going to get into it in a little bit different angle. We're talking about collecting late fees from a tenant who's having trouble paying on those late fees. So this question came from Jacqueline. It's a little bit longer, but I'm going to read this to you, Andrew. She said that she has tenants who keep paying their rent late every month, and the lease clearly says the 5th day, so it's a grace period of 5 days that she gives them. And if the rent is not paid, there will be a $75 late fee attached. All right. So she says, however, they just keep paying the rent late every month, but they don't add the late fee to it. Now, should she just accept the rent amount without the late fee attached to it, or should I evict them if they don't pay the late fees? She says this is the 3rd month in a row that they've done this, where they pay the rent amount late, but they don't include the late fee with it. She just doesn't know what to do, and she's not sure that an eviction would go through because they said they were that they would contest the eviction. So it sounds like she's got a few things going on there, but how do you handle the situation with a late paying tenant? Like, I know I think we talked about it before, but how do you handle the late fees? How do you communicate that properly with the tenant?
So it's pretty straightforward. If you've got a tenant that's late paying and they pay but they don't pay the late fee, usually the first thing we'll do is call them and say, hey, we received your rent payment. It was postmarked on whatever date, but you did not include your late fees. And because you didn't mail this out until after the 5th of the month, those late fees are due. And then usually we'll follow that up with a letter just letting the tenant know, your late fees are due immediately. Generally speaking, what winds up happening is they will wait until the following month to pay the late fee. And actually, to actively discourage that in our lease, we have it's a $50 late fee after the 5th, plus $2 a day for every day thereafter, to kind of actively discourage them from letting those late fees linger, because it just gets worse as time draws on.
Sure.
So I mean, I don't think you need to serve them an eviction notice over. Did she say what her late fee was? $75, I want to say.
75, yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to evict a tenant over a $75 late fee. And you're right, they're going to contest that, and the judge is probably going to look at it. And if your courts are tenant friendly like they are here in New York, they may even side with the tenant on that over a $75 late fee. So I would say call the tenant, let them know that the late fees are owed, follow it up with a letter so that the tenant understands that the late fees are owed. And on that letter, I would actually include a copy of the envelope that they mailed you the payment in, showing what the postmark date is on it, showing that it was mailed after the rent was due. And most people, everybody does it a little bit different. In our office, we go by the post date of the envelope.
Okay.
So if somebody makes their payment online, it's effective that day. If they mail us a payment, it's effective the date of the postmark. And if they come into the office and hand us a payment, then it's effective the day they hand it to us, obviously. So, but we don't go by the date it was received if it's a mailed item. We go by the date it was postmarked.
Okay. And then you'll take that amount right out of next month's rent. So if their rent's $500, they were 75 short, then it's like, hey, you only paid $425 of your rent this month because you already owed 75 from the previous month.
Because you owed 75 for the late fee, and now you owe another $75 late fee because you're late on this month's rent, and now there's a late fee attached to that. So usually, if you're strict on enforcing that kind of a policy, you'll find that these tenants will wind up correcting themselves usually within a couple months. And then you tend not to have that problem again. Either that or the flip side. They just continue to pay rent late and pay you a late fee, which, I mean, that's just extra money in your pocket at that point. So why not?
I had a tenant that consistently paid in the middle of the month, and I would make extra money, and I knew he was good for it. So,
right.
It's like, as long as you're not hard up for that money yourself, you can get a little bit extra. I mean, it depends on what you're willing to tolerate, I guess, though.
Sure. Yeah, everybody's got a risk tolerance. I mean, we've even had some tenants that have like Social Security that comes in on usually like I don't know if it's the 3rd or the 5th of the month or whatever. We've even given them exceptions in their lease and said things like, rent is to be paid no later than the 7th of the month without a late fee. Just because if they're dependent on that income and their income doesn't come to the 3rd, then they have to turn around and mail a check or get a money order or whatever. Sometimes it makes sense to work with a tenant rather than against them in that instance. It's all about communication at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that covers the 3 questions from this week's episode of Ask a Property Manager. Andrew, thanks again for being on the show. I always learn something every week. And if people do have questions or want to join the conversation, what they can do is in the original video that we posted here on rentprep.com Facebook page, we have a link to the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. You can always search for that too. There's over 5,300 now, I believe, property managers, landlords, realtors, and it's a great place to get questions answered immediately from your peers. Cool resource. Love the questions people ask, and keep them coming.
It's crazy how big that group has gotten. It really is.
Yeah. No, it's been great. We've learned a ton from the people in the group, and hopefully we can keep doing these videos because of the great questions that people are asking. So
yeah, absolutely.
Keep them coming. All right, Andrew. I will see you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Eric.
All right. Take care.